SRO.
SRO, so you have a range clear to launch.
And CDR.
You would have to be really, really dumb to be sitting on 7 million pounds of thrust and to not be a little bit scared.
Everything's just rumbling. Got about 1,000 switches that look like this.
You go through Mach 2, Mach 5, Mach 10, Mach 20. It keeps pushing more and more, and it's just... I can't remember thinking of anything else than getting high.
And it is 3G crush, release, float, overhead window, Yahoo, you're in space.
Among all the life forms that people the Earth, men alone have developed a rather unnatural taste. The curiosity to always go and see a little further what the unknown looks like. As dreamers of new worlds, but also guinea pigs of science, astronauts experience the effects of a journey through space in their flesh. Nausea, dizziness, irradiation, stress, angst, depression. In the first-hand accounts collected here for the first time from around the world, they describe the physiological and psychological upheavals caused by space travel. Their disclosures point to the challenges which will have to be met when preparing for the first missions to Mars. The arrival at the space station marks the culmination of years of training and a lifetime of dreaming of space. But only moments after the astronaut has taken his first flying jumps, his body calls attention to itself. His made-on-Earth system is not adapted to space.
After an hour and a half in weightlessness, I felt a slight unease. It was becoming uncomfortable. And then nausea grabbed me.
I knew within 30 seconds of achieving weightlessness or microgravity that I wasn't going to feel great.
When it hit me was on day 2. So I woke up on day 2 and I'd be working completely normally, and then I'd suddenly have 5 minutes where I'd feel very nauseous, very dizzy.
During the first 3 or 4 days, I was always going around with a sickness bag in case I needed to throw up.
After 4 days of flight, I regretted becoming a cosmonaut.
Nausea strikes astronauts in the first hours of weightlessness. On the press conference broadcasts celebrating their arrival in space, half of them are sick, but astronauts hide themselves to vomit.
You don't brag about it, and generally astronauts wouldn't report it after the flight for fear of not being selected again, because when you're sick you're not efficient. You don't perform your tasks as you should, so the other crew members have to work even harder.
The worst nausea in space history affected the American Jack Garn, who remained totally unproductive through the 6 days of his trip. An astronaut's joke says that the variations of his skin tone at least helped make a color scale to grade the seriousness of nausea.
Basically, it's a conflict between what your eyes perceive and how your body feels.
Something has gone very strange with your body, and your brain is trying to cope with that, and it's trying to work out what it is. What's the culprit? Is it the eyes? Is it the ears? Is it the stomach?
The eyes say, you're upside down. The otoliths in the inner ear, which of course float in microgravity, say, nope, not at all. They send conflicting signals to the brain. The brain is puzzled and scrolls down its checklist. The first reason may be body poisoning, so right away it orders to empty the stomach, typical travel sickness.
But Earthlings' brains have got it wrong. Vomiting doesn't help. Without the anchor of gravity, the inner ear can no longer indicate verticality. In space, there is no up or down, only 3 dimensions. Fortunately, within a couple of days, the part of the brain which handles balance turns itself off, and the bouts of nausea disappear.
Okay, I'll see if I can... I'm feeling dizzy. I'll see how quickly it stops. So it definitely felt dizzy initially, and now it's gone.
No, is that quick?
Yeah, completely normal.
Amazing.
However, with a sense of balance now on hold, in order to understand the position of their bodies in space, astronauts can only rely on their sense of sight. And they start feeling strangely disoriented.
For a while, I couldn't get over that feeling of being stuck to the ceiling of the spacecraft. On top of that, I had that sense of diving forward and falling into the void. Of course, it was an illusion.
In the Mir station, there was a central node with modules attached that extended in every direction. And when you came back into that node, you went, which way now? Where is the hatch I'm supposed to go to?
When you fly into a room, if you move from one room to the next and now the ceiling's reversed and is on the bottom, you know, you've had a lifetime of telling you that that ceiling should be above you and not below you. And so you just have to do a quick, I'm in space, adjust, I'm fine.
One week after their arrival, the astronauts' brains have totally adapted to their new environment.
This is the story of a book, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
They now float around the space station like fish in water.
I went to sleep in agony, and I woke up in great shape. I didn't feel nauseous anymore, or any headache or backache. From then on, I started to live just like in paradise.
The miracle of nature is that you adapt very quickly. Weightlessness is very pleasant because you don't feel any more tension in your body. The whole body is completely relaxed.
It certainly is one of the most pleasant sensations that anyone can feel. A sense of absolute lightness, of effortlessness.
It's perfect bliss. I mean, you don't weigh anything anymore. You no longer feel your body and have that sense of absolute freedom.
It's not about floating around. It's about flying from place to place. And I really, really love that.
However, as the astronauts are now testing their new powers, their whole bodies undergo a gradual transformation. a dangerous loss of their earthly condition.
The first time I realized that I was living in a different world was during an experiment measuring our metabolic activity. According to the computer analysis, I was sleeping 44 hours out of 48. When I saw those results, I realized that my body was in a state of lethargy.
Weighing nothing, the body gets rid of its muscles, which have become useless. How can you stimulate muscles in an environment where weight doesn't exist? Special contraptions had to be devised based on bungees, straps, and hard springs.
When I'm asked what I found the hardest during flight, my answer is, to me it was working out. Your muscles don't want to exercise. They don't want to overload. They feel fine.
Working out at the gym is already pretty unexciting. And there you have to, for instance, on the treadmill, strap yourself with bungees. And that tension you get on the shoulders is in fact extremely trying.
I would strap myself down with some bungee cords. Now it feels like 70-kilogram load plate, so it feels like someone's on your shoulders, and then you start running, and I would have to gut it out to get through those workouts.
I would put on my sports outfit and try to persuade myself, run, run, run.
When you have hundreds of people on the ground who know whether you work out or not, it's really easy to work out.
Although they can now fly, men in space must strive to remain terrestrial. But day after day, in spite of all those efforts, muscles melt and bones weaken. Back on Earth, astronauts can hardly raise a victorious arm. Helpers have to carry the heroes around. But on Mars, no one will be there to greet them.
Over there, you won't get the luxury of readjustment. You have to work out right away.
At first, once back on Earth, when I nodded, I felt that my head would make me topple. A head weighs 5 kilos, it's not light. So I thought I'd never manage to get it straight again. It was a real worry at first. Oh dear, oh dear. But somehow I managed, by what I felt like some supreme effort, to bring my head straight again. And then I didn't move any more because I thought I was really going to fall.
Will the first men on Mars be capable of taking more than a few steps on the ground? It is precisely to answer that question that Mikhail Kornienko, only minutes after his return from 1 year in space, was taken to a hangar to simulate arriving on the Red Planet.
I admit it was difficult. On top of that, in a heavy spacesuit, I'm not hiding that I sweated. But nevertheless, it's feasible.
Feasible, although not quite reassuring.
And I figured that would never happen without the preparation we had training the team. And so I'd like
The fainting of Canadian Hilda Marie Pipper right after her return from a few days in space would prove a problem on a deserted planet.
And so I figured I could stand here, standing enough.
Like all the other muscles, the astronaut's heart, which has no longer had to fight gravity to push blood to the head, gets weaker. The body has forgotten what weight is. Through decades, experiments aboard space stations have repeatedly inventoried the physical problems caused by staying in space. Before a genuine perspective for a Mars mission opens, astronauts keep turning around the Earth again and again so that aerospace medicine might learn from the changes in their bodies.
There are huge numbers of experiments in many fields in the station, but what we remember is a lot of medicine and physiology because they demand the most involvement. It's not just about plugging in a system, pressing on start, collecting the results and sending them to the ground. It's really to use your body as a guinea pig, as the field of experimentation. Blood tests, physical checks, biopsies, before and after, MRIs, X-rays, so forth. So in effect, they are those you remember most because they are the most painful and difficult.
To an extent, it is the price you pay. Every person who has the opportunity to go into space has to give something back, and the way we give that back is in terms of our contribution to science and maintaining the space station, but also in terms of the life science that we participate in.
And then ready for the stick. So nice big vane, 30-degree angle. In we go. Wait till we get a flash. There's a flash.
Are the bodies of contemporary astronauts no more than a testing ground for future explorers?
Tube's filling up quite nicely.
How can these ultimate adventurers who must run the flying laboratory for which they are the guinea pigs possibly satisfy their yearning for exploration?
Despite having seen the Earth on IMAX filmed by astronauts, the first time you see the Earth with your own eyes, it's like, whoa, and you're getting tears in your eyes. It's truly astounding.
It's an extraordinary experience on a human level, to be able to see your own planet from the outside.
When you look at the Earth, it's as if you entered a church. You see rivers, forests, oceans, seas. All this gets you hypnotized. It's sort of psychoactive. You forget everything.
The beauty of planet Earth, I thought I would simply observe it like my predecessors did. But it's a beauty that leaves you speechless. It's indescribable.
Hello, and welcome to the International Space Station. I'm Katie Coleman, NASA astronaut. And this is my world. There's different ways to look at the Earth, and it kind of depends what kind of mood you're in. When you're in a curious kind of mood and you're looking down and you see something and you wonder, what is everybody doing there? And I remember just being able to sort of spin around and see places coming and going and realize that this was going to go on forever and ever and ever, and I just loved it.
Space psychologists have named that new feeling reported by all human beings who've traveled through the cosmos the overview effect, meaning the impact of a global view on the human psyche of the Earth lost in a background of infinity.
In fact, when you look at the Earth from space, you immediately feel, not just intellectually, but visually, as a sensation, that the Earth is, how can I put it, a closed system. It's a piece of rock thrown into space, and it's almost miraculous that the conditions needed for life, for animals, plant life, should exist.
We are unique. That's all we've got as Earthlings. So we'd better be careful. We'd better manage the Earth like a spaceship.
Everyone on that Earth, they are the crew of Spaceship Earth, and there is no one else.
The Earth is remarkable. Its buffering ability, its ability to, have oxygen all around us, its ability to have these incredible cycles where, the plants are eating up the CO2 and putting out the oxygen. We have a planet that has evolved into something miraculous. And when you have to try to reproduce that on a very small scale, mechanically really, on a space station, you realize, oh my God, how wonderful the Earth performs.
A spaceship is an ecosystem, a life bubble shooting through the void. The natural cycles of the Earth which maintain life must be replicated by machines. Oxygen and water circulate almost endlessly from the human bodies to recycling machines and back from the machines to the bodies. In that attempted replica of terrestrial life, lighting recreates an artificial cycle of 24 hours, and a small wall space is reserved to hang a few personal tokens. But as weeks turn into months, promiscuity and discomfort increasingly affect morale. Despondency is lurking around the corner.
You have constant artificial lighting, you have constant artificial air. The water never changes, the food doesn't change. And so these kind of things can make for quite a monotonous lifestyle.
We were surrounded with very noisy machines, such as big ventilators, around the clock. I would have liked to hear the sounds of nature, such as the trickling of water or the whistling of the wind. We missed those sounds tremendously.
We miss the smell of Earth. We miss lakes and grass. We miss everything that is connected to the Earth.
As days go by, the dazzling spectacle of the Earth seen from space can become tormenting, like a continuously rolling film of a close but unreachable paradise.
We have a bond. I wouldn't say in the flesh, because the Earth is not made of flesh, but a material bond. You really feel that these molecules of the Earth, which are assembled in those wonderful, beautiful, almost hypnotizing graphic arrangements, that these molecules vibrate in complete unison with those that make your body. In fact, we're the same material. And there is an extraordinary life bond with this planet.
For astronauts looking at the landscape, on the one hand, there is the Earth, a tiny anchoring point for life. And on the other, the universe.
What was most striking to me was that when you looked at the Earth from the outside, apart from its being beautiful, which everyone is aware of, well, the fact that it is completely isolated against the absolute blackness of the space background.
There is this black, but it's a surface, there is a volume, it's finite. When you peer into the cosmos, you feel a kind of vertigo. That is to say, your eyesight has nothing to hold on to. And in fact, the only thing you feel is that discomfort and inner emotion. I often say that the further you look or the further you go, the more you finally meet yourself again, and also the truth within yourself. And I believe that's the big secret of travelers or explorers, the journey of self-discovery.
Every human being who has traveled through space describes experiencing their essential connection to the Earth as a revelation. As if you had to move away from it to understand it. So, for all the space travelers, how can you make up for the deprivation of earthly sensations?
I've asked psychologists to send me sounds of nature. For instance, a morning in the countryside, birds singing, roosters, rumblings of a storm. And one day, as I was training on the treadmill in the American section, I turned on the storm sounds on the computer. Suddenly, Scott arrived and asked, "Where did you get this?" I told him it was sent to me. He asked me if he could borrow it. And from that day on, you constantly heard the storm in the American section.
Astronauts miss the Earth, and also its inhabitants, friends, children, lovers, and strangers. Locked inside a few cubic meters with only a handful of fellow Earthlings they haven't chosen, they go through an extreme sociological experience. For those who will be traveling to Mars, real-time conversations with Earth will be impossible. A message sent will take up to 20 minutes to reach its recipient. These were the conditions experienced just a few years ago when transmission slots were mostly reserved for technical communication. While Jean-Pierre Aigneret was staying in the Mir station for 180 days, his wife Claudie Aigneret, also an astronaut, was training on the ground in Moscow.
We use radio a lot. There was an amateur radio station aboard Mir which let us contact whoever we wanted at our convenience. And Claudie also had an amateur liaison set at Star City in the Moscow area. The problem was that when I was the one emitting, I attracted all the amateur radios in the universe. With my altitude, I reached all the operating stations within a radius of 2,000 miles. And among them a certain Gino in Milan. Jean-Pierre, Jean-Pierre, it's Gino in Milan. Gino, please, I'm talking to my wife if you don't mind leaving us. Jean-Pierre, it's Gino in Milan. We just couldn't get to talk.
You just crave communication, you crave other people, you crave the diversity of mankind. And, you know, you kind of think that's a problem and there's friction and everything else between the peoples of the world. But when you're isolated for 5 months, you just want diversity and you want to talk to people with different ideas and different viewpoints, and you just crave that human connection.
The round trip to Mars will last 2 or 3 years, during which the astronauts will just have a few crew members as their sole companions.
You have to continually look for the ways to see each other. And that's hard to continue to do that, not just when you're new, not just when you're getting ready, not just when something's happening that you're all excited about, but the whole time.
You have to make a conscious effort to be a little bit more sociable, a bit kinder to your colleagues.
In order to get along, you have to be interested in the other person, like in a couple. If your life with your wife is interesting, you can stay together. That's how I've been with my wife for 57 years.
How should you select the members of a crew who must live in a closed community for so long and avoid psychological breakdown? Today, survival training is the trend in space agencies. The sociability of candidates is put to the test of stress and fatigue. But in order to ascertain the applicant's psychological balance, psychologists have developed multiple strategies.
The last 10 candidates selected are locked in a 3-room apartment for a week. And one of the tests consisted in making origami cranes over and over again without interruption.
In such a selection process, you can see what psychologists are looking for everything and its opposite. That is someone who has got temperament, but at the same time is submissive, someone who is ready to risk his life, but doesn't want to take any chances. So you see, it's meaningless, and you tell them what they want. There are meetings and tests. You quickly understand what they want. It's pretty transparent.
When I was applying and then when I was on the selection board, I really think the thing they're looking for most is somebody who's going to be a team player.
My take on that is that it's a very inexact science, and I don't think they have it figured out. And I think it's almost going up the wrong path. You think you want 3 people that are gregarious, that get along, he's the most popular guy, and this guy gets along with everyone. When in fact, when you're up in space, and say you're going to Mars on a 3-year mission, and you're sitting next to 2 other people for 6, 7 months at a time, you better have sort of that mad scientist kind of guy. And so I think the key characteristic you have of any crew that's going to be good, they better be comfortable with who they are as a person and be okay alone.
The first astronauts were chosen for their virility among all those Army test pilots already full of testosterone. 40 years ago, during their 200-day journey, Valentin Lebedev and his fellow pilot experimented with mixing genders for the first time in space history. A woman, Svetlana Savitskaya, paid them a visit for a week.
That's a complicated issue. The woman. Imagine, we were among men. We could float around in our briefs. We didn't shave. Whereas there you had to be careful. You had to control yourself, to look presentable, to shave. So it was tense.
I just think it took a while for society to be ready. I mean, Valentina Tereshkova was the first woman to fly, and then nobody flew for many, many years after she flew. I was starting to think, well, maybe I was born too early. And then all of a sudden, NASA was looking for astronauts for the space shuttle. And I had the right qualifications and was selected in the first group of women that were selected for the United States program.
A macho logic, which is still pervasive in aerospace organizations, explains why today less than 10% of human beings sent to space are women, such as the American Katie Coleman, top left in the picture.
Because we still have fewer women than men, we are a little bit more noticeable. In other words, I still think it's necessary for the women to be of the utmost, to do their job, very, very well.
For the crew bound for Mars, who will be forced to live together for 3 years in a cramped, closed-in space, the question of mixing sexes touches on a big taboo for space agencies. Sex in weightlessness remains a fantasy for advertisers, rather than a subject of interest for astronaut recruiters. Beyond the technical difficulty, the group dynamics that might result from sexual affinities between certain crew members still haven't been studied. Admittedly, the only couplings in space have taken place between the gametes of salamanders.
In Europe, this issue is broached slightly more freely, but I think that whether in the US or in Russia, the approach is a bit more conservative. It's like, you don't talk about those things. One theory is to send only women because apparently it works better. Another theory is to only send couples. There, the problem will be to find them because you don't have that many couples of astronauts. But it's true that if you send an integrated crew of males and females without particular affinities, the question will arise. It might come precisely from Europe. It's something we could contribute to the space program, a more open approach to sexuality.
Whatever the differences in gender, temperament, or culture, in space, teamwork is basic professionalism and is crucial to survival. Right after the Cold War, the two enemy superpowers, the USSR and the US, decided to develop a common space program. The American Jerry Linenger and the Russian Alexander Lazutkin were asked to cohabitate for 5 months aboard the aging Mir station.
The big three things you don't want in space is a rapid decompression, a fire, or a toxic spill, and we had a fire.
On February 24th, 1997, in order to face an additional need for oxygen, Alexander Lazutkin starts a parallel production system. The equipment overheats and catches fire.
The alarm signal started. I saw my fellow crew members turn slowly towards me.
Within 30 seconds, can't see the 5 fingers in front of your face, just total blackout. First instinct is I better go low in a fire. Earth instinct doesn't work in space. Warm air doesn't rise, smoke is everywhere.
Open the window to disperse the smoke? Impossible.
And so I'm heading for the respirator. Yank that off the wall, full rubber mask over my head. It's got a little oxygen canister next to it, flick the lever over, and I get oxygen.
We received the order, prepare the spacecraft for evacuation. I opened the hatch and saw that the whole station was steeped in smoke. That's precisely when I got scared.
I'm up here above the Earth, 250 miles above the Earth, everything floating, myself, 2 Russians, smoke everywhere, weird place to die, Jerry. And you get in that mode where you say, we're gonna get this fire out. I'm gonna see my boy again.
I saw the crew perform like a clockwork. Everybody was in action. No one panicked. No one shouted. Everybody was doing strictly what they had to do. I thought, it's beautiful.
The crew manages to contain the fire, which finally dies out by itself when the oxygen in the capsule is completely consumed. Two hours later, when the last oxygen masks have exhausted their capacity, the Mir station has restored a relatively breathable atmosphere.
When you go through that, you are a band of brothers at that point, and when you face that adversity, there is no one else I'd rather be in space with, because you do learn to trust each other, and you know through all those hard times and those emergencies that the other guy is not going to panic, and that's the guy I want to be in space with.
The first crews who will journey to Mars will have to face perils never met before, physical and psychological problems to which science hasn't yet provided any answers.
Contact. Stop.
Between 1969 and 1972, 6 space crews successfully landed on the moon. 230,000 miles from the Earth. Since then, for economic and safety reasons, no other human being ever returned, and astronauts merely revolve in orbit around the Earth at an altitude of 250 miles. The spacecraft taking the first people to Mars, however, will leave the Earth's field of gravity.
And there's a thing which is going to have a huge psychological impact, is just watching Earth get smaller and smaller and smaller until it just becomes a star in the sky.
For the first time in the history of mankind, humans will actually lose sight of the Earth, whereas we see it all the time. Our home planet is right here.
We have a huge film theater out there under our eyes. The Earth, over there. They won't have any view of the Earth. There will be only stars. Our Earth will become one of the planets of our system like any other.
The crew will constantly be aware that no one else is around to help.
There will be just nothing. We'll be totally alone. Alone like no one has ever been in the history of the world. It will be tricky, psychologically speaking.
To leave the Earth's field of gravity has long been within the reach of engineers. Dozens of remotely controlled machines have ventured into the confines of the solar system. But for the human being contemplating stepping aboard, doubts don't have any technical solution.
Going to Mars, I think the thing that's going to be most difficult is it's a long journey and there's not going to be a lot to do.
What is hard is inaction. That's when you start brooding. We do 12-hour days of work minimum in the space station, so the issue doesn't arise very much. I, for one, was busy all the time, non-stop. I think the secret is you have to give people things to do. On a 300-day trip one way to Mars, I don't know what we're going to do.
The big difference with my own experience is that you won't be able to come back to Earth if there is a problem. To live in such conditions, I'm not sure if I would be up to it.
When you're in your sleeping bag and all the lights are out at night to sleep, even with your eyes closed, you may have some flashes, tiny white sparks flashing under your eyelids.
For example, when I'm resting and eyes closed, I could sort of see some flashes in the back of my eye.
Strikes, flashes of light, streaks of light going across the eyelid.
So all the sparkly little, that radiation, I think all of us see.
And yes, with alarming regularity. So it does bring it home to you that you are in a higher radiation environment.
The particles hitting the astronauts come from the sun and intergalactic space. On Earth, without the natural protection of the magnetosphere, life as we know it could not have developed. And after a journey to Mars, the risk of getting a radiation-induced cancer could vary according to individuals, from 1 chance in 10 to 1 in 2. These are unacceptable risks for space agencies. But what does the new generation of astronauts think about it? Who may concretely contemplate one day leaving for Mars?
We have imposed ourselves a risk level which I think comes from American government health regulations. We can't have more than a 3% rise in chances to get cancer, or such an arbitrary figure, because you had to set one. So in that respect, the journey to Mars could not be made.
Career limits imposed by the agencies are very restrictive. And personally, but it's true for most astronauts, we would be ready to expose ourselves to higher levels of radiation.
We in the Corps of Astronauts would all be ready to accept 6%. I mean, 3, 6%, what's the difference? I don't know where the limit is. Maybe at 30% we'd start reconsidering, but you never work at zero risk.
Which impulse drives a man to risk his life to walk on an uninhabited planet or to take a close look at the cosmos? For the contemporary astronaut, the ultimate experience is to get out of the spacecraft and plunge into the void. In a few decades, maybe centuries, these images symbolizing state-of-the-art technology may recall mankind's tentative dips on the outer shores of planet Earth. But as of today, they feature the two drives of exploration. On the one hand, the quest for knowledge, in which mankind is a necessary tool as long as machines cannot replace it. And on the other, the thirst for human experience, the desire to plunge into the unknown in search of the new. In April 1997, Jerry Linenger accomplished his first and only extravehicular spacewalk with his Russian flight captain.
And sitting inside that airlock before we finally opened the hatch up, you know, at that point my pulse was going a little bit, and I'm saying I finally get to do this.
The third crew member, Alexander Lazutkin, was following the operation from inside the Mir station.
Jerry was going out first. The captain said, "Jerry, open the hatch." And Jerry, "Roger, I'm starting to open the hatch." Hatch opened, Jerry, get out. Jerry says, "Roger, getting out." He got out of the vehicle, and then he was supposed to say, "I'm out, all good." But Jerry, at that point, we were flying over the Mediterranean. His wife, Katia, was on a boat there, and Jerry knew it. He started shouting, "Katia, hello!" and kept repeating, "How beautiful it is here!" You couldn't stop him. Everybody on Earth wanted to know whether Jerry was out and okay, whether the captain could step out too. The captain was also waiting for that command from Jerry, but Jerry was wonderstruck.
And I'll tell you what, you know, what a ride. You're out there among the stars and you're doing a spacewalk, and this is awesome. and had a profound moment along those lines, thinking, I am a nothing, I am a speck. And then the next moment, I'm looking down at the sunrise, and I'm saying, I am like the creator looking down at creation here. It is fabulous. So you feel like a speck, and the next time you feel like the creator. And that difference is just profound.
After months in space, all of them have changed, aware of the unique experience they have just undergone. However, they all anticipate the return to Earth with relief. The brutal re-entry into the atmosphere marks that thin and vital frontier between space and the earthly world. The body will take up its habits again. Within a few days, the men from space will recover their sense of balance. Within a few weeks, a few months, their muscles will be strong enough to let them stand upright again. But on a psychological level, the space travelers will now try to reconcile the day-to-day of terrestrial life with the view they had of their planet, lost in the infinity of the universe.
Today, I live on this planet and I feel like an alien. Everyone knows that the Earth is round. Everyone knows that there are many stars, that there is the sun, galaxies, a universe. Knowing it is one thing. To actually see it is something else. I did see that world.